People often believe that life moves in only one direction. When you're young, people tell you to dream. When you're older, people tell you to slow down. And when you reach 60, many people quietly expect you to stop chasing new goals. But what if they are wrong? What if the best chapter of your life hasn't happened yet? What if your greatest success is still waiting for you? This is the story of a man who proved that age is not the end of a dream. Sometimes it is only the beginning. My name is Henry Collins. Last month, I celebrated my 60th birthday. Some people gave me greeting cards. Some gave me flowers. Others joked and said, "Now it's time to relax. You've worked enough. Enjoy retirement." I smiled politely. But deep inside, I felt something very different. I wasn't ready to stop. In fact, I felt as though I had never truly started. For 38 years, I worked as a bus driver. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise. I drank a cup of black coffee. I put on my blue uniform. Then I drove the same streets, the same bus stops, the same routes, day after day, year after year. I met thousands of people, children going to school, nurses rushing to hospitals, office workers carrying heavy bags, grandparents visiting their families. Some smiled at me. Some looked tired. Some never looked up from their phones. I greeted every passenger with the same words. "Good morning. Have a wonderful day." Many people remembered my face. Almost nobody knew my story. Every evening, after my shift ended, I went home to a small house on the edge of town. My wife, Margaret, always welcomed me with a warm smile. She had a gift for making ordinary days feel special. Sometimes we cooked dinner together. Sometimes we sat on the porch and watched the sunset. She often asked, "If you could do anything in the world, what would it be?" I always laughed. "I'm too old for dreaming." She would gently shake her head. "No one is too old to begin." I never forgot those words. But I never acted on them either. Life was comfortable, safe, predictable. Then one winter morning, everything changed. Margaret became ill. At first, we believed it was only a cold. But weeks passed. The doctors ran more tests. One afternoon, we sat quietly in a hospital office. The doctor looked at us with kind eyes. "I'm sorry." The room suddenly felt smaller. The silence became heavier. Margaret reached for my hand. She squeezed it gently. She was stronger than I was. Over the next several months, we spent every possible moment together. We talked. We laughed. We looked through old family photographs. One evening, while watching the rain outside, she asked me the same question she had asked for years. "Henry, if you could start over, what would you do?" This time, I answered honestly. "I've always wanted to build furniture." She smiled. "I know." I looked surprised. "You knew?" "Of course. For years, you've spent your weekends repairing old chairs and tables. You light up whenever you're working with wood." I laughed softly. I suppose I do. She held my hand. Promise me something. What? When I'm gone, don't spend the rest of your life wishing you had tried. I couldn't answer. The thought of losing her was too painful. She smiled gently. Promise. With tears in my eyes, I whispered, I promise. A few weeks later, Margaret passed away peacefully. For months afterward, the house felt empty. The silence was louder than any sound. Every room reminded me of her. Her favorite chair, her gardening gloves, her books, even her coffee cup still sat beside the kitchen window. Friends invited me out, neighbors checked on me, but I rarely left the house. One rainy afternoon, I found an old wooden box in the attic. Inside were photographs, birthday cards, and letters. At the bottom of the box lay a small notebook wrapped in blue ribbon. On the cover, in Margaret's handwriting, were the words, "For Henry, open when you're ready to begin." My hands trembled. I untied the ribbon. Slowly, I opened the first page. It contained only one sentence. The rest of your life is still waiting for you. I read the sentence again and again. Something changed inside me. The next morning, I walked into my garage. It was dusty and filled with old tools. There was an old workbench in the corner, a hammer, a saw, several pieces of forgotten wood. I looked around the room. Then I remembered the promise I had made. I won't spend the rest of my life wishing. That afternoon, I bought my first notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Day 1. Not of retirement, not of growing old, but of beginning again. I had no customers, no workshop, no business. Only one dream and one promise. Little did I know that one simple decision would completely change my life, because 3 months later, a stranger would knock on my garage door and ask a question that would open a future I had never imagined. The next morning, I stood alone in my garage. Sunlight came through the dusty windows. The room smelled of old wood, oil, and memories. I looked at the workbench. For years, I had used it only on weekends. Now, it would become the place where I would begin a new life. I picked up an old hammer. Its wooden handle was smooth from years of use. It had belonged to my father. He was a carpenter. When I was a little boy, I loved watching him work. He could take a rough piece of wood and turn it into something beautiful. One day, he told me, "Henry, wood is like people." I had laughed. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "Every piece has imperfections, knots, cracks, rough edges. But if you're patient, you can discover the beauty hidden inside." At the time, I thought he was only talking about wood. Now, 60 years later, I realized he had been talking about life. My first project was simple, a small wooden stool. I measured every piece carefully. Then I measured again. I wanted everything to be perfect, but it wasn't. The first cut was too short. The second piece didn't fit. One leg was longer than the others. When I finally finished, the stool wobbled every time I touched it. I sighed. Well, it's not perfect. Then I remembered Margaret's voice. Keep going. So I built another. Then another. Every day I learned something new. How to sand the wood more smoothly, how to choose stronger joints, how to fix small mistakes instead of throwing everything away. Slowly, my hands became more confident. A month passed. My garage began to fill with small tables, stools, shelves, and picture frames. I had no customers, no advertisements, no business. But I enjoyed every minute. For the first time in years, I woke up excited. One Saturday morning, my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, walked into the garage. She looked around with wide eyes. "Henry, did you make all of these?" I smiled. "I've been practicing." She picked up a small wooden picture frame. The corners fit together perfectly. "This is beautiful." I laughed. "It took me 3 attempts." She smiled. "I'd like to buy it." I blinked. "Buy it?" "Yes. My granddaughter's birthday is next week. I think she'd love it." I hesitated. I've never sold anything before. Mrs. Carter placed some money on the workbench. "Then today will be your first sale." I looked at the frame, then at the money. It wasn't a large amount, but to me, it meant everything. After she left, I sat quietly for several minutes. I wasn't smiling because of the money. I was smiling because someone believed my work had value. That evening, I looked at Margaret's photograph. I made my first sale. I wish you were here to see it. Outside the window, the evening sun painted the sky with soft orange light. For the first time since losing her, my heart felt a little lighter. Over the next few weeks, word began to spread. Mrs. Carter told her friends told their families. Soon, neighbors started visiting my garage. Some wanted bookshelves, others wanted coffee tables. One young couple asked me to build a dining table for their first apartment. Every customer had a story, and I loved listening to them. One afternoon, while I was finishing a rocking chair, someone knocked on the garage door. A young man stood outside. He wore a business suit and carried a notebook. "Mr. Collins?" "Yes." "My name is Ethan Walker. I own a small cafe in the town center." I smiled. "Nice to meet you. I've heard wonderful things about your furniture." "Thank you." He looked around the garage. "I have a question." "What is it?" "Could you make 20 tables and 40 chairs?" I almost dropped the piece of wood I was holding. 20 tables? 40 chairs? "That's right, for my new cafe." I stared at him. There must be some mistake. I work alone. I've only been doing this for a few months. Ethan smiled. "I know. That's exactly why I came." I looked confused. "You build everything by hand. Every piece has character. I don't want factory furniture. I want furniture with a story." His words touched my heart. Still, I shook my head. I don't think I can do it. It would take me months. Ethan nodded. I understand. He turned to leave. Then he stopped. Mr. Collins, may I ask you one question? Of course. If you say no today, will it be because you truly can't do it, or because you're afraid to try? Those words stayed in the air long after he walked away. That evening, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Margaret's voice. Don't spend the rest of your life wishing you had tried. I walked into the garage. I looked at the unfinished rocking chair. Then I looked at my father's old hammer. Finally, I smiled. The next morning, I called Ethan. When he answered, I took a deep breath. I don't know if I can build everything perfectly, but I'm willing to learn. Ethan laughed happily. That's all I needed to hear. After hanging up the phone, I realized something. The biggest opportunity of my life hadn't arrived when I was 30 or 40 or 50. It had arrived when I was 60, and I had just said yes. But neither Ethan nor I knew what was coming next, because only a few days later, a powerful storm would destroy my small workshop, and I would have to decide whether my new dream was strong enough to survive its very first disaster. That night, dark clouds covered the sky. The wind became stronger. Rain fell harder than anyone expected. I stood by my living room window, watching the storm. I hope the garage is all right, I whispered. The next morning, I walked outside. The storm had passed. Broken branches covered the streets. Leaves were scattered everywhere. As I got closer to my garage, my heart began to race. The roof had partially collapsed. Rainwater had soaked the wood. Several shelves had fallen over. My workbench was covered with debris. The tables and chairs I had been building for Ethan's cafe were damaged. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Everything I had worked for over the past few months seemed to be gone. I slowly picked up one of the broken chair legs. Then I sat on the floor. I guess this is the end, I said quietly. At that moment, I heard footsteps. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Carter. She looked at the damaged garage. Oh, Henry, I'm so sorry. I forced a smile. It's all right. No, she said gently. It isn't. She looked around for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone. What are you doing? I asked. I'm calling someone. Within an hour, more people began to arrive. Tom, the local electrician, Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery, a group of high school students. Even Ethan came. Soon, my driveway was full of people. Some carried hammers, others brought ladders. Someone arrived with fresh pieces of wood. I looked around in amazement. What is all this? Ethan smiled. You've helped this town. Now it's our turn to help you. For the next 3 days, everyone worked together. The students cleaned the garage. Tom repaired the lights. Mrs. Jenkins brought sandwiches and hot coffee. Mrs. Carter swept the floor and organized my tools. I watched them with tears in my eyes. Years ago, I had spent my life driving people to their destinations. Now, those same people were helping me reach mine. When the work was finally finished, The garage looked better than ever. Someone had even painted the walls. Above the entrance hung a new wooden sign. It read, "Henry's Workshop." Below it were smaller words, "Handcrafted with patience, built with heart." I stood silently. I don't know what to say. Mrs. Carter smiled. "Just keep building." The following weeks were busy. Every morning, I woke before sunrise. But this time, I wasn't driving a bus. I was building dreams. Ethan often visited the workshop. One afternoon, he said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "People love your furniture, but they love your story even more." I laughed. "My story?" "Yes. You remind people that it's never too late." His words stayed with me. When the cafe finally opened, every table and chair inside had been made by hand. Customers noticed immediately. "Who built these?" they asked. Ethan proudly pointed to a small wooden plaque near the entrance. It said, "Handmade by Henry Collins, who followed his dream at age 60. The story spread quickly. A local newspaper wrote an article about me. The headline read, "The Man Who Proved It's Never Too Late." A few days later, a television reporter visited my workshop. During the interview, she asked, "Mr. Collins, what made you decide to start a new career at 60? I smiled. It wasn't because I suddenly became brave. It was because I finally became tired of making excuses. She asked another question. "Were you ever afraid of failing?" I laughed. Every single day. But I discovered something. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward even when you're afraid. The interview was shared online. People from different cities began calling. Some wanted to buy furniture, others simply wanted advice. One afternoon, a man about my age knocked on my workshop door. He looked nervous. "Mr. Collins?" "Yes. My name is David. I'm 62. I've always wanted to learn painting, but I thought I was too old." I smiled. I used to think the same thing. He looked at my workshop. "Do you really believe people can start over?" I handed him a small piece of wood. "What do you see?" He looked carefully. "A rough piece of wood." "Exactly. And what could it become?" He thought for a moment. "A chair? A table? A shelf?" I nodded. The wood doesn't know what it will become. It simply allows someone to shape it. I looked him in the eyes. People are the same. As long as you're alive, your story is still being written. David smiled. "I think I'll buy some paint tomorrow." Months turned into years. My little garage became a real workshop. I hired 2 young apprentices. Not because I needed help, but because I wanted to teach them what my father had taught me. Every scratch has a story. Every mistake teaches a lesson. Every new day is another chance to begin. On my 65th birthday, Ethan invited me to his cafe. It was full of customers. Families laughed together. Friends shared meals. children colored pictures on the wooden tables I had built. I quietly placed my hand on one of those tables. I smiled. Not because I had become successful, but because I had kept a promise. The promise I made to Margaret. I looked out the cafe window toward the sunset. In my heart, I whispered, "Thank you. I finally started." As I walked home that evening, I realized something. People often ask, when is the right time to follow your dream? The answer is simple. The right time is not when you are young. The right time is not when you have enough money. The right time is not when everything is perfect. The right time is the moment you decide to stop waiting. Thank you for listening to this story. If it inspired you, please like this video. Share it with someone who thinks it's too late to chase a dream. And subscribe to Fluent English Hub for more original English stories that help you improve your English while discovering meaningful life lessons. And always remember, your age tells the world how long you've lived. Your courage tells the world how much life you still have left to live.